Today, as my guest, Chaplain David Graetz. He is stationed at the VA hospital in Lexington, Kentucky. Let me introduce you to Chaplain David Graetz. Hello, David.
Hello, good to see you.
Tell me a little bit about your duties there.
Well, I'm the chief chaplain, so I provide administrative support to our chaplain service.
Hmm.
We have a two division hospital, so our main hospital, where most of our medical beds are on one campus, is on one campus, and then we have another campus where I am.
Okay, very good. For a while during the Iraq War, you were stationed in Kuwait. Can you tell me a
That is
little bit
correct.
about your duties there?
Well, I served in a place called Camp Arif John, Kuwait,
Hmm.
and we were mostly logistics there. So we sent equipment and
Hmm.
military members through Kuwait up into Iraq and Afghanistan, and so folks would stop through our area on their way in and on their way out. So I was the chaplain serving with a Tennessee Guard unit that was there providing that support. So I was their spiritual leader for several hundred members of a unit.
It must be tough being a chaplain to men who are actually going to go into combat. And uh, talk a little bit about that.
Well, and I wanted to also include that we have a lot of women who are going into combat these days too. So
Yes,
uh,
I'm sorry.
uh,
Yes,
no,
you're
no,
right.
that's perfect. I think we think in those terms, but we have a lot of women, including a woman by the last name of Hester, who was the first woman since World War II to receive a Silver Star for valor, and
Hmm.
she was a Kentucky Guardsman up in Iraq the same time that I was in Kuwait.
So
And
you
so we
sound.
have some
I detect a note of pride in your voice.
anything that happens with the Kentucky Guard here. That's very much a point of pride for me. And we've got some good men and women who come from there and have given a lot of service, a lot of their time and their lives as well.
Hmm.
Uh, but um, but yeah, just to talk with folks who were coming and going, and certainly for me, I think I've seen more of that within the VA when folks have come back and have had issues with moral injury and some other traumatic events that have happened in
Hmm.
their lives, and just be having the privilege of really hearing their story and working with them and helping them
Hmm.
to heal from what they've been through, what they've
Hmm.
seen, what has happened to them. I count that a huge privilege.
Right. Um. Now there is this uh, this event called a ramp ceremony.
Yes.
Would you tell us what a ramp ceremony is, and then tell me your story about your experiences at a particular ramp ceremony?
So a ramp ceremony is it's a ceremony where a number of military members get together and to honor a deceased military member. So
Hmm.
this could be from any branch of the service. So I don't want to just say soldiers.
Right. For instance, specifically in Kuwait, the bodies of fallen servicemen and women would be brought from Iraq into Kuwait and then literally put on a ramp onto a plane that would take their bodies back
Correct.
to the
That
United
is
States.
correct.
And what was your function?
So as the bodies were brought across the ramp and loaded onto the aircraft, there would be men and women, military members that would line both sides of the container that was being brought on, and they would salute, and then the containers would come on the aircraft, and we had a small ceremony that we said some prayers, some readings, just a way to honor that man or woman's service.
And then
Um,
one day you had an urge or a feeling that you should do what? Something
So
different.
I just felt like that wasn't I hadn't done enough. That there maybe was something else to do. It seemed, very much. It was a read ceremony, was written out, and the prayers were something that it wasn't written out, but you would say a prayer. And so I just felt like that day I felt like there wasn't enough that I had done, and just felt led to go and put my hand on every one of the containers. These were containers that were flag draped, and
Caskets.
and they really weren't caskets; they were containers.
Okay.
Um, and um, and so I went and put my hand on each one of the containers. Didn't know who was inside. Didn't know whether there were a man or a woman. Just knew that there were somebody's remains in there, and just had a short prayer for each one of them, not only for that member, but also for their families.
Mm-hmm.
Just to because I knew what was going to happen here, that this was
Mm-hmm.
going to be the
Mm-hmm.
start of a life-changing event, that a
For that
family member
family.
had been
Yeah.
lost, and so I knew what was going to happen. So I prayed for their family members back home as well, to
And
help
how
them
did
through
that
this very
make you
difficult
feel?
time. It certainly, to me, it was more of a personal touch that I could give to the service.
Right. And
And
the first time you did it because you really felt like you were an inner urging, like a, to do this.
I just felt like I was being told, and I was being led to do something different there.
Okay. And you weren't reprimanded for this. You weren't told that it was inappropriate or anything like that.
oh no, not at all,
Did
not at all.
other
And
chaplains follow your lead?
I don't know that because typically these ceremonies were at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and
Okay.
there was one person who did most of the ramp ceremonies, that was uh, that was out there in that, close to that area, and then we took turns coming out, and
Okay.
we would come out and sit in our vehicles until they called us and told it was time, that the
Right.
aircraft had to get there and get ready, and so I was not the only one doing these, but I would be the only chaplain, because there weren't
Hmm.
two chaplains needed, and
Right.
especially not in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Mhm.
Um, so let's jump ahead 5 years and jump from Kuwait back to the United States. This is where your story becomes unforgettable. And when you told it to me, I could hardly believe what you told me. So, so take us through that part of it. It's 5 years later. You're still a military chaplain,
Still a military chaplain, and
but you're
and
back in the
so
United States.
we all have to be endorsed by an organization. So I myself was endorsed through the National Association of Evangelicals,
Hmm.
a group that endorsed a number of different denominational chaplains. And
Hmm.
so, on an annual basis, they will do some training and bring their chaplains in. On this particular year, Paul Vicalvi was our endorser that year,
Hmm.
and Paul lived in Branson, Missouri, and
I know it
attended a
well.
church there in Branson.
Yeah.
And so we stayed at a location that where we had different classes and different events and different training events that were going on. But on one particular evening, Paul and his wife and two others were part of a quartet, and they decided they wanted to put a concert on for us. But along with that concert, they had a potluck supper for us at their church. So Paul instructed us, now don't all of you go and sit at one table,
Hmm.
spread out and go talk to, because if people want to get to know you. So
Hmm.
I bet there were 75, 100 people that were there that evening in this fellowship hall,
That's a
tables
lot of
set
potluck.
up, and all kinds of food that was there for us, and so we sat down, and I just at random sat down at a table across from an older gentleman, and most of the time that we talked during the meal, it was just un, nothing memorable
Right.
whatsoever. Just talking about each other and where people lived and what he
Getting to
did
know
and different
getting to know
things.
each
Just
other.
just
Yeah.
getting to know each other, just a little bit of chit chat. But towards the end of the meal,
Uh-huh.
he looked over at me, and some folks had gotten up, and I think maybe there just weren't as many people at the table. And he said, my grandson was killed in Iraq. And so we talked a little bit about that,
Mm-hmm.
and asked when it took place, and he died while I was in Kuwait.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began to tell him a little bit about the ramp ceremony, and that we honored every service member that came through there. And I said that, in fact, I was there, and it just struck me. And I don't know how I know this. This is certainly something I want to ask God and verify this with him. But I think that his grandson came through on that night when I was prompted to do a prayer to
Wow.
touch each one of the containers.
That
And
sends
the
chills down my
gentleman, he just started weeping. It was just something that he said, "Oh wow, so you were there." And it just, it just, I think, brought him some comfort that that it wasn't just, some cold, calculated, sending him back, kind of a bureaucratic kind of a thing,
Right.
coming back, but that there was a personal touch involved in there, and that
Someone
we
cared
showed
about them.
that somebody cared about his grandson.
Yeah.
And
That
and
sends chills down my spine, and it's amazing that, the distance in geography and the distance in time, and you were brought together with
mhm,
this man in Missouri
mhm.
after your experiences in Kuwait. It happens for a reason, doesn't it? It's not a
It does
coincidence.
happen for a reason. You just never know, and you kind of think. At least I do. I think back. Well, what do those ramp ceremonies mean in the middle of the night? Nobody was there. Nobody was watching. You know, um, what do they mean, and do they have any kind of eternal effect on folks? And I think with this particular case, it did. So when we had finished talking, and literally, I think I had just told him that, and somebody came around and said, "Okay, it's time for us to go to the sanctuary for this concert." So we went and we sat for probably 30, 45 minutes during the concert, and at the end of that, I got up to leave, and I was walking down the hallway to go back to my vehicle to drive back to where we were staying, and I hear this, "Chaplin, Chaplin," kind of a voice, and of course,
Uh-huh.
there were probably 60 or 70 chaplains in there, and so we all kind of turned around to see who was calling for his chaplain, and it was this gentleman bringing one of his good friends, and he came running down the hallway to catch me before I left, and he said, he wanted his friend to be introduced to the man who prayed for his grandson,
Oh,
who was there. So it
oh.
really it touched me. It was it
I
was
imagine
something
there
that
might even have been some tears,
mhm, mhm.
even from military men.
Even for military men. Yes, yes.
Listen,
So
that's a
mhm,
fantastic story, and one that I'm never going to forget, and I'm sure the people seeing this podcast will never forget this story because it reassures us that in a world of war and death and confusion, there's always a presence there behind the scenes that can reach out and touch us at
mhm,
any moment in many different ways. And this story is just such a wonderful demonstration of that spiritual touch.
mhm.